Hey, everybody, the big moment is almost upon us. My birthday. And of course, there's a little race called the Kentucky Derby that's being contested today as well. And I thought with the defection now of Forte that it would be a good time to talk about the three horses I think you have to have on your Kentucky Derby tickets. But before I do, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the pace is affected by the scratches in this year's Derby. Really not much. However, there was never a lot of front speed in this edition of the Derby to begin with. And the way I've always gauged the pace in the Kentucky Derby, which has been quite effective over the years, is by using Kiran speed points. Now, William Kiran was a handicapping author who came up with a point system, 0 to 8 scale, based on a horse's running style to determine who the likely front runners and closers would be. I think is far more effective than using pace figures because really the pace is dictated by what the connections want to do and more importantly what the horse wants to do. And so Kieran Speed Points looked at style and that was the basis of his ratings. So since 1992, when there has been a race with less than 3 horses that had 7 Kiran Speed Points, so those are your front running horses, only one of 47 horses that trailed by 5 lengths or more at the first call of their final prep won the Kentucky Derby. And that horse, Country House, actually won via disqualification. Now, I bring that up because that's where the real impact is felt on the closers. There's not a real advantage for the front runners. When a horse has the most Kiran Speed Points, and there are no ties, so it's the sole best point total, 0 for 13 in the Kentucky Derby. Verifying has the most points, most Kiran Speed Points in this year's Kentucky Derby. I'm not sure that's going to benefit him. It's not going to hurt him any, but I don't think it's going to benefit him. It will hurt the horses trying to close, so just keep that in mind. The first horse you have to have on your Kentucky Derby tickets is Hit Show. Now, what I don't like about Hit Show is that he's a late foal. He's a May foal. I'm going to have more on that later, but it just hasn't given him the time to develop that other horses have had. Remember, in horse racing, the universal birth date is January 1st. So the fact that he was born in May, he's still considered 3 years old. And because the Derby is run in May, most of these horses will be 3, but some are going to be 3 years old in 1 month, 3 years old in 2 months, or 3 months, or whatever. And obviously that gives them an advantage because there is so much development that happens at this time with young racehorses. So that's the negative side. The positive side is that Hit Show has shown a lot of talent right from the get-go. We'll start with the fact that he's been favored in every start. Horses that were favored in their last 3 starts since 1992, a 2.00 impact value, meaning they're winning twice as often as expected. And real quickly as to how that works, let's say you have a 20-horse race, 1 in 20 chance, theoretically, so you have a 5% chance of winning. Horse like this would be winning at a 10% rate. So it is a significant factor. Now that sample does not produce profits. And the reason for that is fairly straightforward. Typically, you're going to get the really good horses in that subset. Secretariat, Justified, those kinds of horses. But Hit Show's 30 to 1. So something to watch. The other thing I like about Hit Show, and this speaks to his development, is he's got 2 wins by at least 5 lengths. Now, I know a lot of you poo-pooed that in the one video I did, but it really is meaningful. Horses that have multiple 5-length or greater wins, a 4.82 impact value in the Kentucky Derby, meaning they're winning almost 5 times what is expected. Very impressive. And they produce profits to win of 48.5%. So that I definitely like about Hit Show. The other thing that I like is, first of all, the connections, which I don't have stats for that, but I like the way they brought this horse along, and it's shown in that final workout, which is very, very good. Now, I rate workouts on a fairly simple scale. I'm looking at the time of the work. I'm looking at the distance, the day since the work. Pretty basic stuff. But they do have positive stats as the workouts get better and negative stats as the workouts get lower, especially in the Kentucky Derby. So those are the reasons I like Hit Show. Now let's talk about Angel of Empire. This horse has a lot of positives. I'm going to start the discussion with the foal date. This is an April foal. And you'll notice on this chart here that horses that were foaled in April or later have a 1.61 impact value in the Kentucky Derby and have produced profits across the board. Now, what's interesting about that is I mentioned Hit Show was a late foal, and I kind of talked about that as a negative. Well, May foals, it is a bit negative. There has been at least one Kentucky Derby winner that was foaled in May since 1992, but the bulk of the positive stats come from the April foals. And again, what this relates to is the fact that these horses are more likely to show leaps in their development cycle, whereas horses that were foaled early, a lot of times they're the ones that show that early ability and they don't quite progress like you would like to see. Kind of like Forte. That was one of the issues I had with him. Angel of Empire is not in that class. He's showing lots of improvement. And not only do you see that from the foal date, or can you, guess at that from the foal date, but he shows it in the past performances. First and foremost, that last race, LSR of -4, horses that posted an LSR of -5 or greater have won the Derby 9 times since 1992. That's a 1.58 impact value, and they've averaged a $2.26 net return, so the sample is profitable. So that's always nice to see. The other thing that I think is just kind of interesting, it doesn't really make a strong case, but it's kind of an interesting stat, is the fact that Flavien Prat, the jockey, stays aboard Angel of Empire. Remember, he was on King's Barnes. He chooses Angel of Empire. Now, there have been lots of cases of jockeys choosing one horse over another only to see the other horse win. I remember Mike Smith with Thunder Gulch. But I do like the fact that Pratt is showing faith in this late developing foal, this improving horse. And you'll notice in the Kentucky Derby, horses that are being ridden by a different jockey than last time, just a 0.6 impact value. So they win less than expected. They do return a profit, though, so keep that in mind. The biggest reason I like Angel of Empire is right here. In the Kentucky Derby, it is incredibly important that you get positioned before entering the stretch. Horses that enter the stretch and have a lot of work to do, that's really at the heart of turf races. That's what makes a good turf runner. It's not what makes a good dirt runner. In fact, John White, who does some excellent work, he has a strike system, and he talks about this factor a lot, that 56 of the last 60 Kentucky Derby winners were either first or second at the stretch call. Now, a lot of people think the stretch call is coming out of the turn. It's not. In the charts, it's with 1/8 of a mile to go. So that's about midway through the stretch. So horses have to be in position at that time. So if you're making that late charge, it's not going to work. You've got to move around the turn. And there's a lot of positive stats related to horses that can gain positions from the first call to the second call. And that's not always the turn, but it's a pretty good, general way of looking at it. And last but not least, Two Fills. If you've been watching my previous videos, you probably know by now that I love this horse. He fits everything I'm looking for in a Kentucky Derby. And it starts with that last prep in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. That has been a very prolific prep for the Kentucky Derby. And I say that not just based on performance, but what it does for the horses. Because the strength of preps varies. At one time, the Bluegrass Stakes was the preeminent prep for the Kentucky Derby. It's not good at all in recent years, and it's arguable that it's been the worst prep. It's certainly produced the most starters. So these things change. The Flamingo Stakes was once a big prep for the Kentucky Derby. It's not even run anymore, and the track it was run over doesn't even exist anymore. What I like about the Jeff Ruby Stakes is that it's run on a synthetic surface. I know a lot of you are thinking, why would that matter? That's a bad thing. Well, that's what the crowd thinks. And that's why it's a good thing. Because if you look at the stats, since 1992, horses that last raced on a synthetic surface have a 1.1 impact value, meaning they're holding their own, but they produced 111% ROI. So they're holding their own, but the crowd is dismissing them, probably assuming that they're synthetic horses. And granted, that is a danger, but I'm not willing to make that judgment about Two Fills based on one race. That'd be like saying Secretariat is a turf horse because his turf debut was spectacular. He had some pretty good other races too, and so has Two Fills. In fact, he's won 3 races by 5 lengths or more, 2 of them on dirt. That's an amazing factor in and of itself, and I've talked about it ad nauseum, so I won't bore you more with it here. But even horses that won their last prep by 5 lengths or more, there have been many Derby winners, a 2.33 impact value, and a 20% ROI since 1992. So lots of things to like about this horse. Improving LSRs, just adding to the list. This is a factor that used to be really, really big for me. It's changed a little bit as the surfaces have changed so much because, again, it's really hard to compare a dirt track with a synthetic track. But there have been 5 of 58 Kentucky Derby winners that shared this trait since 1992, and that list includes some nice long shots. Charismatic, Giacomo. By the way, quick aside on Giacomo, I loved that horse when he won the Kentucky Derby. So I keyed him with almost everything in the field, except for Closing Argument, who ran second. So I did get a win ticket, but that was about it. So that's my sad, sad Giacomo story. Closing Argument screwed me over. But the improving LSRs is a big deal. And Two Phil shows those. Also, by the way, King's Barnes, in case you're interested. Another thing, God, there's so many things with this horse. Let's take a look at the speed figure. So this is my par speed figure, but it agrees with the Brisnet figures and also the Beyer figures. Horses with a last race best speed figure, no ties, so the sole best figure, have won the Kentucky Derby 5 times in the past 30 years. And there have only been 23 qualifiers. That's why it says 5 of the past 23. With a 3.88 impact value, and it's cut off there, but they've also produced some nice profits. War Emblem is the one that probably comes to mind for most people. So Two Phil's has that in his favor as well. And if that wasn't enough, he had an excellent workout to finish his Kentucky Derby prep. Now, some of you would look at that and think, well, is that Hawthorne? You want it to be over Churchill Downs. When you look at the impact values, it makes very little difference where that last workout was. Most of them are at Churchill Downs. That's why you can find stats that will say, well, X of X or X of Y have shown a workout at Churchill Downs, because most of them are. Two Phil's didn't. He got a top rating in terms of my workout scale, and observers were kind of raving about that work too. The only negative here is you have a 42-day layoff. I don't know if that matters that much in modern horse racing, but it is something to consider. But Two Phil's to me is one you must use on your Kentucky Derby tickets, regardless of who you use. Thank you very much for visiting the channel. Please like and subscribe to the videos if you do like and want to subscribe to them. If not, I hope you all rot in hell. No, I'm kidding. Totally kidding. Honestly, I hope you all have a great Kentucky Derby day. It should be an awesome day of racing. Thanks for stopping by.